Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of the Pride Investigator Advice Podcast. I am your host, Andrew. This is going to be episode 83, and in this podcast, we're going to discuss, or I'm going to discuss rather, a surveillance that did not go very well for me. And the reason I want to share the story is because I think there's some things to learn from it. And you know, I kind of reflected on this surveillance as I was writing it for the blog, and so I hope some of these kind of things you can just chew on and think about for your own future surveillances. And this particular surveillance that went wrong, there was a point where I was pretty scared. I was pretty scared. But just to kind of provide some kind of like context for kind of some of the things or the reasons I did some things, was because a lot of things that I did was how I was taught, and we were kind of taught to be aggressive. This is like, first 2 years of my career, when we were just taught to do things very aggressively, and we also had to do things because we had limited resources to find information to kind of piece things together, which is much different now than it was then. But before we get into that, I just want to let you know that this episode is brought to you by Private Investigator Advice. Investigators depend heavily on templates. We use them to write reports every single day. Basically, it's like a blank canvas, but formatted so we know where everything's going to go and it's going to look pretty. And that's why I was glad to be able to be selling the Investigator bundle on my website. In the Investigator bundle, it comes with the intake sheet where you can get all the important information from your client, about your client, and about the assignment. It also has the investigator retainer agreement, so you can make sure when you're entering an agreement or a case with a client that you have a clear understanding of what their expectations are, and they have a clear what your expectations are regarding the assignment. So that's always important to have. And my favorite one, which it's something I've used throughout my whole career, is the surveillance template. Every surveillance investigator uses a surveillance template, and the great thing is you only have to buy one once, or you only have to have one once. You don't have to. It's not something you have to keep getting. Once you have it, and you can add to it or take away from it. So there's that, and just to make sure that I kind of was making sure that everybody was taken care of in regards to. It could be a private investigator purchasing this, or it could be one that wants to be a private investigator. I also added a example surveillance report in there, and a video walkthrough just to kind of make sure everybody kind of understands what each section represents, and even the example report when you kind of see what the verbiage is and why it's there. And that's it. That's all from that plug for Private Investigator Advice. So if you decide to pick one up, I thank you in advance, and I appreciate your support. Okay, so let's get back into the story here. So this was an assignment where, I'm not going to be able to say specifics because the specifics about certain things really don't matter in the story. Basically, what I did in my actions are the important parts. Well, there's some other important parts, but yeah, the reason why I was there and all that stuff doesn't matter. But this story takes me to where I had to travel out of my home state at the time. And when I went there to this state, every time I travel, I try to get a tinted vehicle. I'm going to be helpless, really, if I don't have a tinted vehicle. So I always try to get one. And in this case, I did. And I specifically remember getting a Toyota Sienna. And this was my first experience with a Toyota Sienna. And by the way, I instantly fell in love with it. I just thought the vehicle was super great, super great. So after getting the Toyota, I traveled to my first assignment, and though I don't remember every single specific thing that happened during that assignment, I know that it was a rough surveillance. Like, it didn't go well. I think the person might have suspected me, and it was just basically because I had to insert myself into the surveillance and had to talk to people and pretext, and the more you do that kind of stuff, the more you have a chance of causing suspicion with your subject, which I remember happening. But that's not the story. So then I finished that surveillance, and I went on to the next one, and I got into the town, and I kind of prepared for what was for the following day. And so this is where it's been a long time now. I mean years and years and years and years. So I don't remember if the thing I'm about to tell you happened on the first day or the second day, or I can't remember if I had completed the first day or not. But what I remember is that I had to we had limited information for the state. Either it was because the person that I was following for surveillance didn't have vehicles registered to him, or we didn't have access to that information. I don't recall. But what I do remember is I had to go to the door and knock on it to confirm that they were home, and probably identify what they looked like, because in those days, Facebook really wasn't a thing. And if it was a thing, it was just becoming a thing. But wasn't something that the investigative community relied on back then. And when we were out there back then, it was like, you get there, and if you didn't find something on the internet with a picture with 99% of the time, you didn't find a picture of the person. So the main way that we, found out, who the person was, by going to the door and shaking their hand and identifying them that way through a pretext. And this is one of those particular times, and I couldn't tell you what the pretext was that I used, but I did get the person that I was looking for to the door, and I was able to identify who it was. So anyways, and I do remember in this surveillance that I didn't have a clear view of his residence. So I was doing a lot of drive-bys, and it wasn't an issue due to the area because it was a busy area, but I just didn't get to sit on the residence. And that didn't really affect anything, because I remember doing one drive-by on a certain point, and the subject that I was conducting surveillance on was outside of the residence, and they were putting some stuff in the back of this truck. And there was another person there, and they ended up getting in the vehicle and taking off. And so, mobile surveillance was initiated, and I started following the subject. And so I remember the subject driving to this semi-rural location. There were houses in the area, but it was predominantly like fields and like undeveloped areas, right? And I know I didn't go right in with them. I know that they went in there, and I knew that if I went in there, nothing good at that point was going to happen. And so and this is where it kind of gets foggy for me. So forgive me, but I know I didn't go in right away, and I can't remember if I discussed the things that I was about to do with the client or not. I think I did. And it was agreed upon about what I was going to do, but I can't remember. So I don't know. I just want you to have that context in mind. So anyways, I waited about 30 minutes, and just to kind of also provide some context, is these Toyota Siennas, while they have tint, this factory tint, it's not limo tint. And you can still see through it if you're trying to. Right. I mean, it's just the reality of it. Heck, I have limo tint on my vehicles, and I can still see through it sometimes with light. A certain light hits the van. Anyways, so what I ended up doing was driving down there, and it was just like this. It was this dead end road. There were some houses, kind of like a couple, not a lot, and then there was this open field. It looked like there's some undeveloped property, and there was my subject down there. It was like trees and whatnot, and the person that they were with was like doing some I don't know, like maintenance to the property, like mowing and weed whacking, and my subject was just standing there. He wasn't doing anything, and so I was like, okay, I've got to get some video. Like, I don't think I had any video of the subject at that point, so I just randomly pulled over to the side of the road, and I crawled into the back of the van, and I was crouched down, and I put my camera up, and I'm videotaping. And at the angle I was at, I don't know if this subject could have seen what I was doing. They might have seen me crawl to the back of it. I'm not sure. But I videotaped, and it got to a point where I just felt so uncomfortable. I mean, I'm literally the only vehicle out there. It's them, and it's me. And I'm just, I'm like, there's this anxiety that builds up, and you're like, I just can't sit here anymore and do this. This is nothing good. This isn't good. So I end up getting, back in the driver's seat, and I drove off, and I saw this dirt road way, 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 way down. Like it was forever down. At least in my memory, it was forever away. And this dirt road kind of crossed along the side of the this big field area, and there was these clumps of trees and bushes and whatnot that were there. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, so maybe I'll just go drive over there. I'll park, and I'll go through the woods and see if I could just kind of sit in the woods area and videotape through there. And so that's what I did. So I parked and got my camera, and I'm kind of going through the woods, and I'm just kind of being careful. I'm really far away from where I left them. Like they're far away from where I was. And so I was just hoping that they weren't gonna see me, right? I'm cringing as I tell the story. Anyway, so I go through. I'm so stupid. I go through the woods, and as I'm kind of maneuvering my way around these trees and bushes, I get a glimpse of my subject, and he is really close to where I am. Like he's walked. He must have started walking as soon as I drove away to this area, and now he's only like 30. I'm trying to maybe 30 yards from where I am, and just at the moment that I saw him, he was looking the other way. So I don't know if he saw me or not. And I turned around and I started. Man, I don't know how much I weighed, but it was probably like 230, 240 at that time. I don't know, maybe 220. I don't know. Long story. I broke Olympic records with the amount of booking that I was doing. But in that little area that I was kind of running through, there was muddy in some spots, and I was running, and my foot hit a mud, like this mud thing, and my shoe stuck in the mud, and I went like 3 or 4 steps forward without a shoe. And I ran back to get my shoe, pulled the shoe out, and now I'm running with one sock, one shoe in hand, camera in the other hand, and I'm just booking to my van, and I get into my van, and I just tear out of there. Like it's just ridiculous. And then I'm like, my heart, 100 miles an hour, I'm like, oh my gosh, what just happened? And anyways, I get far away, and I call the client, and I'm like, yeah, and I don't know the exact words, but basically it was like, hey, we're done. Like the game is over. Surveillance discontinued. This is how it went down. Okay, everyone. Before we go on to the things you can kind of learn and take from this surveillance story that I shared with you, I just want to let you know that this next part of the episode is brought to you by Audible. Do you ever feel like you just don't have enough time in the day to read books? Like for me, when I did surveillance, I didn't want to keep my head down too much because, of course, I got to see what I'm, conducting surveillance on, or who I'm conducting surveillance on. So when I was able to listen to Audible, I could listen to a book, a story, learn about different things without taking my eyes off of what I was supposed to be focused on. And so that's one of the reasons why I have no problem promoting Audible on this podcast. And so anyways, Audible offers a 30-day free trial for you to check it out. Basically, with the trial, you sign up, you get a free book. You don't pay anything for it. And, if you determine that you don't like Audible before the 30 days is up, you go ahead and cancel, and you get to keep that free book on your phone or your tablet or wherever you downloaded it. And I think it's just a pretty generous offer for you to figure out whether if it's something right for you. So go ahead and go to www.audibletrial.com/PIA. For both the PI advice template bundle there and this Audible offer, I'm going to have all those listed in the links below in the video and in the podcast notes if you're just listening on your phone or whatever from your podcast player. Okay, so what can we take from my actions on this surveillance assignment? That was many, many, many moons ago. Well, earlier in the story, you heard that I had to make contact with the subject that I was conducting surveillance on. And again, at this time of my career, we didn't have as many resources to work with to identify people, who they were, what they look like. And so, knocking on the door, we call that physical pretexting. When you knock on the door or whatever, that was just one of the main ways to do it. The other things that we battled with when you work for a company and you have specific types of clients is this. I don't know whether they negotiated it or whatever, but there's this thing where at the 4 hour mark, you have to be able to identify that your subject was within the residence. And so that was kind of one of those things that kind of pushed investigators to make contact with the residents instead of maybe being a little more patient. And so I can't honestly remember how that went down and why I had to knock on the door, but I remember I had to. So anyways, if you could avoid doing that right away, that might help prevent any kind of suspicion from the subject that you're watching. I'm much more of a passive investigator these days, and I have, I use a lot of different things that I've learned over the years to help me avoid having to knock on the door these days. So, anyways, I think the obvious mistake, which you probably heard when I was telling the story, was that when this individual had left the residence and went to this location, it was kind of rural and there wasn't a whole lot over there. I clearly parked too close, and I don't know. I can't remember if I had talked to the client about that or not. But basically, I'm trying to articulate this. That was kind of the culture for the company that I worked for. We were aggressive. We were aggressive in getting video, and we didn't do anything illegal necessarily. It was just like we would do something like that. We would park in an uncomfortable place, uncomfortable for the investigator, because it's just like this blatant parking, and we would roll film, and and just hope that the person that we were watching didn't piece it together, other than, hey, that's a really weird guy parked his car there for no random reason. I also think that regardless of what the person I was watching thought when I did that, I think that was probably the moment where their suspicion level just shot through the roof because of the things that took place afterwards. And I think it was I don't know what I was thinking then. I don't know if I had figured out, I don't know. I don't know. I can't remember the train of thought that was happening at that time. But if I would have recognized that, yeah, they know that I'm here, or they know why I'm here, or they know what I'm doing, I probably wouldn't gone to the next step of the woods, the stupid woods. Anyways. Then we get on to the third mistake that I make, continuing with this aggressive surveillance. I don't know how else to put it other than just being aggressive. I say aggressive meaning like I just kind of kept pushing the envelope. So that was kind of like the cherry on top of mistakes for this particular surveillance effort. And so, anyways, I a lot of things could have happened if that guy would have, I don't know, got a hold of me, or that, and would have confronted me. Like, a lot of bad things could have happened. So it was like, one marginally bad mistake after another. The only way that I would have been able to come out with a smile is if I would have gotten video from the woods, and he would have been none the wiser. And then I would have this awesome story to tell where, I did this and I got video, and then I did this and I got video, and I came out with like an hour of video. And to some degree there was that type of competition in the industry, at least for the company that I worked for. Like there was this one-upsmanship, like what did you do to get the video? And again, nothing illegal, but it's more or less like what uncomfortable position did you put yourself in to get that critical video, or or how much video did you get? That was a big thing. Back when I was early on in my career. Okay, so there we are. We're compromised at that part of the story, and I'm really glad that I didn't have some kind of incident as a result of the steps that I took during that surveillance. I've shared this a lot over the years, but I was burned a lot early on in my career, and a lot of the reasons that I was burned was because of some of the rules that were put in place with clients, that things had to be done. Also had a lot to do with the lack of information that we had, compared to what we have now. And I definitely approached surveillance a different way than I did in the past, and that is not only better for me because I'm able to not have to, have, conversations with neighbors all the time, or, I don't get burned by the subjects that I conduct surveillance on. But the most important thing is that as investigators, we're able to bill out our day. We don't want to, crash and burn within the first 4 hours of a 3-day assignment, because then, you have potentially 24 hours of work, of surveillance. And if you go overboard within the first 4 hours of a surveillance, you're giving away a ton of hours because you have to stop. You can't keep going. And so, anyway, so that's, and I don't know what day I was on that assignment. But that's always something I want you to take from this is hey, think the long game. We want to be successful, not only in providing as much information we can to the client, but we can't provide a lot of information if we can't do a surveillance. So you got to think long term. You got to think really just being covert. Not blatant about your surveillance efforts. We want to be sneaky. And as I think the word I coined the other day, sneakily, if that was a word. But anyways. So, I did get my shoe back when I was running back, and I'm sure I was able to clean it off. But that was just one of those stories that will always stick in my head forever. And it's been so long. That's why I felt comfortable sharing that with you. Anyway, so I really hope you guys got something from this podcast, and you can kind of take something from the stupid mistakes that I did early on in my career. Yeah, that's why I feel so comfortable sharing things with you guys in regards to the lessons that I've learned, because I made so many mistakes early on that it helps me to make less mistakes now and be a lot more profitable on my investigative efforts, my endeavors. So yeah, that's it. So anyways, guys, thank you for listening, watching, however you're consuming this podcast. I do appreciate you guys. I do appreciate your support. I appreciate your questions you guys are always asking. Some of those I turn into podcasts or articles, and sometimes I just answer because they've been already answered before. But again, thank you guys for your support. I told you guys I'm ramping up the podcast and the videos and the blog. So you've probably already seen that now. It's a little more, a little more consistency. And that's what I'm looking for. So anyways, have a great rest of your day. And you guys got to check in next week for the next podcast. All right. I'll see you on the next one.